Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation. My name is Janine Donnelly. I am the Manager of Webinars for IBM System Magazine, and I will be the moderator for today's event. Today's webinar, Ensure Your Company is Not Fodder for Social Media, Dynamic Mainframe Systems Management to the Rescue, is sponsored by BMC Software. Our featured speaker today is Jay Lipovich. Jay is Principal Product Manager on the Mainframe Solutions Strategy Team at BMC Software. Jay engages mainframe sites in market sensing research to develop strategies that address mainframe infrastructure management needs. His primary focus areas are system management solutions and MLC cost management solutions. Have you considered this scenario? Things are going well when suddenly your company is the subject of unflattering press, criticized in social media for failing to meet customer expectations. Having digital customers ups the ante for the mainframe. Today, Jay will discuss how you can meet digital engagement service expectations and avoid a firestorm of negative publicity. So without further ado, Jay, I'll turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Janine, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, welcome, and thank you for joining us. You know, in my family, I have all daughters, and my daughters and my wife go shopping, and frequently, whether they're shopping at a brick-and-mortar store or whether they're online, they'll say, we're going to this store or we're visiting this site, and I respond, oh, they're a BMC customer. They actually have become a little tired of hearing that. But the fact is that 82% of the Fortune 500 companies are BMC customers. And I mention that because that gives us the opportunity to discuss with customers the challenges they face and the difficulties that they're encountering as their businesses change. So we meet with customers, we examine surveys. We've actually reviewed over 10,000 touch points in the last year. And one of the things we're hearing loud and clear is that mainframe sites are having some challenges managing the disruptive technologies that are impacting their work, while at the same time delivering an increased level of business service quality for their critical applications. Social media and digital engagement are two of the key disruptors, and they're impacting mainframe systems management in some surprising ways. You know, when you think about it, dinosaurs became extinct because they could not evolve and adapt. Mainframes have not become extinct specifically because they are so good at evolving and adapting. And so today, we'd like to explore the evolutionary demands on systems management viewed through the lens, if you will, of the impact of social media on a business. This kind of impact is far-flung. If you had an opportunity to see a news item this morning about ESPN's making some business changes, and it says that they are shifting their focus toward digital as they face cable subscriber losses and increased costs. So even in an activity such as media and ESPN, the impact of digital engagement is that's playing a role in the way they have to run their business. So what's the risk? Janine mentioned the danger of being fodder for social media. And unfortunately, or fortunately, there was an incident in just the last few weeks that highlighted what can happen. So there was an airline passenger who was denied boarding on a flight. Now, the fact is, according to Condé Nast Traveler, over 40,000 people in the United States are involuntarily denied boarding in a year, in 2016, for example. And as flyers, we actually agree that that can happen as part of the contract of our ticket. So what happened in this case? Well, the passenger, number one, refused to abide by the contract and said he wasn't going to get off. and then he was forcibly removed. And why was this different from the 4,629 examples from 2016? I think we all know. People pulled out their cell phones and they videoed it, and it was posted widely, and it very quickly became the trending topic. So what was the impact? Well, that company, on the day that it was posted, saw a market value drop of $1 billion. Now, it settled back, recovered, and by the end of the day, had only lost $250 million. And since that, it's recovered more, but it's not back to the level it was at prior to the incident. And they don't know at this point whether that incident would affect the decisions of leisure travelers who have to pick an airline and will pick it based on a variety of factors, some of which might include that. So social media has an impact on our businesses for 4 key reasons. Number one is we don't have any control over it. It will happen as it happens. We also don't have control over the accuracy of what's reported. And we can't go at, if we don't do a good job of essentially damage control, then controlling the accuracy becomes a double problem. But the 2 real impacts are the velocity at which this information accelerates throughout the internet and the reach. It can touch everybody who has a connection. Now, there are positive impacts from the use of this technology. There was an article that talked about another airline, for example, when they were having some booking problems and customers were complaining on social media. The airline used social media to respond to the customers and help to solve their booking problems. And they actually got a lot of credit for being able to use digital channels to help their customers solve their problems. There are other companies who are actively tracking social conversations. They're looking for 2 things. For one, they're looking for early warnings that there's a problem. Let's hear from the voice of the customer right away. And 2, they're looking for opportunities where competitors are having problems that they could leverage to grab competitive market share. So in the case of the airline example, there were airlines who trolled the event that took place. And the one thing that everybody should keep in mind with those probably is the lesson of stones and glass houses. So in spite of the risk, in an IBM global C-suite study, 9 out of 10 CIOs expect to use digital engagement by next year. So we're going there. And what does it mean to us? So when we try to consider from the IT perspective, what happens when we start doing extensive digital engagement? A few things happen. Number one, we get new applications. Number 2, we get new data types. And not too many years ago, if you had an accident, you wrote out a report, sent it to your insurance company, and that report was, a few hundred or a few thousand characters in a database. Now, you take a video of the accident, and that video is several hundred megabytes, perhaps, that has to be stored, maintained, and found. So these new data types present a different challenge for how to manage the systems and how to manage the databases. The volume of activity and the volatility are changing fairly dramatically, and we'll look at some data on that. And maybe the most troublesome part of it is the entitlement that our digital customers feel. And that is, response ought to be instantaneous, and it should be available whenever I want it. Now, if companies do digital engagement in the right way, the benefits are huge. Increased interaction with customers, much higher satisfaction and net promoter scores, loyalty from the customers, and at the bottom line, the opportunity for customers to spend more money with your organization. If we do it wrong, reputation and the loyalty of customers are at risk, and revenue that we might have gotten or that we might be getting is also at risk. So as you think about this, you work in the mainframe space, you say, well, mainframes, we're not sure this really affects mainframes. There was an interesting article in February. They were talking about there were 3 fairly major airline outages in the last 8 months. And the article talked about the problems that the airlines were having. This is a quote from the article. It said, some of the airlines are still running IBM mainframes and using software that was written in COBOL. You can almost hear a gasp there. And this was a quote from George Hobeika, who is the founder of the website Air for a Watchdog. And as it goes on, it said, citing technology that is the tech equivalent of writing with a quill on parchment. Now we know in fact that mainframes aren't that technology, but there's a perception that the mainframes may be responsible for those kinds of outages. And as we think to ourselves, we're used to the mainframe and the 5 nines mantra. So 99.999% availability, right? Well, it's interesting what's happening. This data is from the BMC Mainframe annual research, 1,200 respondents in the total research. In this question, over 1,000. And we asked, have you experienced one or more unplanned outage of a mainframe business service? So not did you have a disk go down, but have you had an outage of a mainframe business service? And 11% said they had a significant outage of a mainframe business service. So that's not 99.999, that's only 89%. So we're seeing a change in what we used to expect from mainframes. And as we looked at that same survey data, we see some of the causes. So the survey asked what impact companies are seeing on their mainframes from digital engagement. And as you can see, 4 out of 5 said they're seeing increased transaction volumes. Nearly 3/4 are seeing increased data volumes. And 2/3 see increasing volatility and unpredictability. Now, when you add to that these other 2 factors, one is faster application change. As companies engage with customers digitally, customers constantly want something new, and competitors are doing new things. So companies are looking at ways to constantly, quickly update the applications that customers use and the way that they engage with them. So we're seeing faster application change. And we're seeing new technologies. Nearly 3/4 of those in the survey are using Java on the mainframe. So with all of that, we wonder, is this real or is this hype? And there was an example from not long ago from a large financial services organization. They had an outage, a series of outages and slowdowns that lasted about 6 days. Finally, a senior vice president had to make a statement about it, and he explained that the shutdown came from a convergence of events, a spike in the end-of-month traffic, payday transactions, government disbursements, end of the quarter, coupled with the release of new code for the online banking system and migration of customers from an older platform to the new platform. Volatility, unpredictability, increased volume, application changes, and trying to engage with customers in new ways, which led to outages. So in all of that, we see impacts and implications for systems management. As we discuss with our customers what they see and what's happening, these are where we see the stress areas. Now, number one, this issue of more rapid changes to applications. There are several if you will, collateral effects of that. Number one, we're seeing change processes either being stressed or, in some cases, not being followed in the way that we used to follow them. The mainframe was noted for how well change process was managed. It's one of the ways that we deliver high quality, high availability, and reliability without problems. But the rate of application changes is stressing the change management process, and it's causing the organization to have to accept more changes that may not have been vetted in quite the same way as they had been. Second, there's more complexity in the environment. The way to get digital engagement involves, in most cases, stitching together pieces from various places, and the mainframe is a part of that. So there's complexity that extends beyond the mainframe, and then there's more complexity within the mainframe. Companies have discovered that the data they have on customers is a gold mine. And so putting that data together in new ways and providing new information to customers to help them engage and to offer to them more products or more services is valuable to the business, but it adds complexity. And third, we have less subject matter expert knowledge about various technology pieces. Part of this is because of the changing skills demographics. And part of it is because, as noted in the survey, new technologies are coming along. So there was a presentation done at GuideShare Europe a year ago by the German company Fiducia. And they have been under a multi-year march toward implementing Java on the mainframe and actually using it to replace some of their IMS code for some of the obvious reasons of the benefits with skills and with manageability. But one of the things they noted in their presentation was that there was a need to train the systems teams in Java because it was a new technology and they didn't have the same level of knowledge about Java that they had about, say, KICS or IMS in their case. Fourth, there's less understanding of what's going on. You know, we can almost say we aren't as smart as we used to be. We don't know what we used to know. So the things we understood about how critical applications operate, and when something goes wrong, the subject matter expert could look at one or two indications and say, I've seen that, I know what's going on, I understand the application, I can help solve that. So we have less understanding because of the changes, and we have less understanding because of the retirement of skills. Finally, because of customer expectations, we actually have less time to find, analyze, and fix the problems that may be created by the digital engagement and these other four disruptions. So we thought it would be interesting and in keeping with the idea of market sensing and understanding what mainframe people are doing. We'd like to ask you about your view of the implications. And so Janine will conduct a polling question to let you share what you think are worrisome concerns around systems management.
Thanks, Jay. So as you can see, we have launched that survey. We are looking for your feedback to this question: which of these are most worrisome? And you can select all that apply and hit submit. We'll tabulate the responses and share them with you momentarily. And as you submit your answers, I will just let you know that we will be sending out a follow-up email following the webinar, more likely tomorrow, but it will include a link to the recording of today's event, as well as other valuable resources, links to other valuable resources that you'll be interested in. And I think with that, Jay, we have the results.
Okay, so the results have been sent to the audience. That's interesting. As we look at these, the smallest concern is rapid application changes. So in some of your environments, either you're not seeing the rapid changes or you feel like you have a handle on how to manage those. More complexity is the number one most worrisome thing. And that's followed closely by the time available to find, analyze, and fix the problems, and less understanding of the nature of the environment. So it's really interesting to see your perspectives. They are similar to some of the perspectives we've seen in the survey data we've looked at. But as we talk about, okay, how do we address those? Let's spend some time understanding things we might do. As we've looked at survey data, again, we've seen 3 activities that are being identified as supporting systems management for what we'll call your digital lifestyle. The number one is analytics. Now, in a survey done by the Society of Information Managers in 2017, this survey went to over 1,200, and maybe more importantly, 490 of those were CIOs. So these are the people really directing what's happening and where things are going. The number one area for increased budget, according to the survey respondents, was analytics. Now, for many companies, analytics is about mining the data they have to be able to engage with customers in a better way and perhaps to be able to drive additional revenue. And we have to wonder if IT is like the cobbler's children. Have we not used analytics in quite the way we could to understand systems management better? The second thing is because of the skills concern, when those executives were asked about what was personally worrisome to them, the number 3 answer was skills. Now, number 1 and number 2 were security and disaster recovery. Kind of not surprising those would be number 1 and number 2. Let's keep the lights on and not have any disasters. But number 3 was skills. And then in the Mainframe survey, asking executives, what techniques will you use to address your skills concerns? Invest in automation was the number 1 on-platform answer for those executives. So analytics, built-in problem solving, and using automation. So these help build what we'd like to suggest are 4 key requirements for dynamic systems management. First is to be able to recognize a problem, and you'd like to do that before it becomes a trending social topic. 2, automatically respond where a proper corrective action is known. 3, alert and react to problems that matter. And 4, guide the systems group to the problem and through the problem resolution. You can see that many of these reflect the concern for skills and the knowledge of the environment and the ability to react more quickly as customers expect better performance. So let's talk about recognizing a problem. The graph at the top is kind of the legacy traditional 24-hour graph we used to know. We recognize what would be referred to as the McDonald's curve in the middle of the day. So a peak before lunch, a little drop off at lunch, a peak after lunch, and so on. And we would typically set thresholds for daytime and for nighttime off peak. If we had a 2-shift view or maybe 3 shifts. With digital customer engagement, the peaks and valleys change, and they change constantly. So setting a static threshold may not be relative to what's happening, and it takes the ability to dynamically set thresholds. And so that capability really has to learn what's happening from your environment. So if we take the history of what's happening, we observe how specific key metrics are performing, we understand what's normal for those using some sophisticated analysis, then we can determine what would be a good threshold. And as things change, those numbers have to constantly adjust. And then because they're changing and adjusting, you don't want to be manually going in and changing all of your thresholds. This has to be a self-managed, closed-end process, if you will. And take into account things like the calendar. Because end of month and end of quarter may look different from a Wednesday in the middle of the week. Your business cycles, if you're in, let's say, the package shipping business, the activity from October through December is a lot different from the activity at other times of the year. You may have different shifts and have to accommodate for those. And as noted, things will change dynamically. The volatility, the volume, the variety of different activity, and the variability are all driven by digital engagement. And so having dynamic threshold determination is kind of a starting point to make sure you're digitally ready with your systems management effort. The next area is automatically responding. Historically, you would watch a monitor, you see a problem, somebody looks at it and says, oh, looks like that's looping. You know, I need to cancel or suspend or call somebody. I'm going to take some action. With so much happening, it's difficult to have the time to do that and to be able to catch everything that matters. So systems management needs to automatically respond. So for example, in this example, it automatically detects looping jobs. It automatically detects high CPU usage. And then besides setting an alert or an alarm, it can take action. And the action may be to cancel the job. It may be, based on the criticality of it, to send off a high priority email to an application owner and say, here's what we're seeing, here's what's going on, here's what we think we might want to do. What do you think about that? Another area, one that probably isn't thought about a lot anymore, and that's VTAM. So VTAM resources can become unavailable. And if you have an application failure, you have to get an alarm, somebody has to go look at it, you have to go do a restart. What you'd like to have is your systems management do that for you. It detects the failure, and then under your direction, you've told it, if that happens, go ahead and automatically reactivate it. And here are some parameters. And actually, I can tell you how many times I want you to try. And then if it fails, I need you to send a stronger alert message because we haven't been able to restart it. In most cases, the resources will be able to be restarted. You don't have the outage. The outage that looked like it was about to happen doesn't end up happening. And so the automatic response is the best way to solve a problem before it becomes an issue that impacts your customers. Now, if we consider the next level, as I mentioned, capacity or the digital engagement challenges the capacity of your systems. Digital engagement is very dynamic. It's very volatile. So how do you adjust when those things happen quickly and dynamically? One way to do that is to automatically adjust the capacity of your system to match what's happening. So using an automatic dynamic capping approach that will adjust the caps to allow service for those critical applications that need it, and will reduce the capacity for those non-critical workloads that are going on, allows the system to automatically accommodate the ebb and flow, the spikes and the decreases, again, without you having to look at it, make changes, and worry about meeting your SLAs. And in this kind of effort, there's a side benefit, if you will. If this works properly, the goal underneath it is actually to reduce your subcapacity or your MLC license costs while it's managing to the service levels that you need. So you get the double benefit. I think everyone's familiar with the Christmas tree story. So you set up alarms and alerts, you start having a bunch of them go off. You finally get so many that the monitor looks like a Christmas tree and everybody ignores it. We were speaking with a customer a few weeks ago, talking about the challenges and asking them, what they needed, and they talked about a particular area, and they were using a software solution for that. And we said, well, you could get alerts, and they said, well, we get so many of them that they haven't been meaningful, so we just turned it off. And we see that that's a challenge in a lot of sites. So how do you manage in such a way that you get problems surfaced by alerts or alarms that really matter? It starts with metrics. So the first point is, which metrics? Out of the hundreds or thousands of metrics, there's a set that, from best practices perspective, they're the ones that you look at first. The next challenge is do you have good thresholds for them? We talked about dynamic thresholds, and that's the approach that lets you have a threshold that's valid and that stays valid. Some while ago, I was meeting with the director of a large international financial services company, and we talked about their monitoring effort. They have a very, very sophisticated monitoring effort. I talked about their use of alerts and alarms, and he said they didn't have that many. And he said the reason was they don't have time to research what would be a good threshold. And that's the challenge holding many people back. So using dynamic thresholds, a self-determining approach, it's possible then to have thresholds that are valid. The next step is to understand when those thresholds are violated, does it really matter? So if I have a threshold that's exceeded, in one period, 10-minute period, and then it doesn't happen again during the rest of the hour, I have to say, was that really a problem? Now, if I have that same threshold exceeded 8 times during the hour, was that a problem? So sophisticated alarm management allows you to filter the understanding, and using a concept that in the BMC Mainview terminology is called persistence. It allows you to understand if this was a meaningful alarm because it didn't just happen once. It's something that we have to react to. And then, with good metrics, good thresholds, sophisticated alarm management, you end up with what we'll call smart alarms. Smart alarms are ones that are actionable. And that's what we're looking for, right? We're looking for a way to understand what do I need to deal with and what can I ignore. And so smart alarms built on the right metrics, valid thresholds, and filtering of the events allow you to manage in a dynamic way, matching what's happening with digital engagement. Probably all of you have experienced this. Phone call comes, say, hey, we had a problem with the network this morning. Can you take a look at it? Yeah. So what's going on? Well, it's not happening now. Okay. So then you have to try to recreate it, or you have to wait for it to happen again. One of the biggest challenges for tech teams in systems management is capturing the failure data when it happens. And so first failure data capture is a capability in systems management that works like this. This one's related to IP. And with so much activity going on in IP, this is a key area to focus on. So an alarm triggers an event that says we've got a problem. And knowing that what you need to solve the problem is a packet trace, it then starts the packet trace. And because the monitor alarm has all the context of addresses and activity, that trace is focused just on the failure area. And then when the problem goes away, the alarm causes the trace to stop. So you don't end up filling up a whole disk array with packet trace data sets. So now you've got the diagnostic information immediately available. You don't have to try to recreate it. You don't have to wait for it to happen again. You get on top of the problem and get faster resolution, and the net is increased availability and service to your customers. Now, I mentioned skills as a concern. Nowhere is it as critical as we're seeing in the IMS area. IMS has been around for a long time. That suggests that some of the technicians working with IMS have been around just as long as IMS. So as companies try to deal with the skills issue, one of the things that a systems management approach can do is take the intelligence and include it in the solution and guide relatively newer technicians to the problem. So in this case, it calls out what we'd characterize as a misbehaving BMP. It recognizes the characteristics and highlights those that need attention. It also can highlight, for example, those programs that should be preloaded just because of the delays that are being experienced in the calls and the extra CPU that's being done. Preloading can reduce CPU and improve responsiveness. But somebody has to know the application historically to be able to decide how do we do preloading, when in fact we can build that capability into a solution to guide someone to the areas to focus on and how to resolve it. Well, we've talked about a lot of things. It kind of comes down to this. The passive monitoring can be characterized as monitoring a technology. There's a lot of manual process. Specifically, monitors are looking at individual technology silos. The alarms, well, you get the Christmas tree effect. And typically, subject matter experts are the ones who have to diagnose the information and decide what to do. And in many cases, you're incurring some high CPU usage, which has an impact on MLC cost. With dynamic systems management, the approach is, first, let's be proactive. Let's use intelligent self-learning automation to handle as much as possible. We need a single view of what's happening, because the complexity now means, for example, a problem that manifests in CICS may end up being something that's caused because you're using Liberty and Java under Kix. And when you get into that, it may turn out to be a process that's running in USS. So to flow through the problem solution, you're going from Kix monitoring to Java monitoring to USS monitoring. And that needs to happen seamlessly and easily. As we noted, the use of smart alarms or intelligent alarms allows you to avoid a lot of hassle. And finally, cost effectively. If the monitoring uses offloading capabilities of zips and uses efficiencies for collecting redundant data once, for example, that can reduce the CPU overhead that you have to put onto it. So let's ask a polling question related to if you wanted to change from passive to dynamic systems management, which areas would be the areas of focus? So Janine, if you'd like to do this poll.
Great, Jay. Yes, so we have excuse me, here we go. Now we've sent the poll out. Please check all that apply and remember to hit submit. And while we wait for your results to come in, just a reminder that you can ask an online question at any time throughout the webinar by putting it into the Q&A panel. And we will be doing Q&A at the end of the presentation. And so we'll give you a moment. So results are starting to come in, Jay, but there's a little bit of a lag, so I'd like to take just another moment.
Sure. That's fine. So early results, I can tell you that early results are showing be more proactive, use more automation as key areas where you'd like to do more, and of course require less time and effort. Now it's balancing out a little more among the others, but still more proactive and more automation continue to be the top two. So when Janine ends the survey, she'll send the results to all of you. And as I said, what you'll see is, number one, 90% of you would like to be more proactive than reactive. 81% would like to use more automation. And then 59, almost 60%, do a better job of creating alarms that matter, have a more complete view of the technologies from a single pane of glass, and require less time and effort. Okay, well, thank you. I don't know if you found those responses interesting or surprising based on what you were thinking about. So when we talk about dynamic systems management, I guess the three ways to say it: needs to be intelligent, needs to be intuitive, and needs to be cost effective, because the mainframe continues to be challenged by budget cost challenges. So finding and fixing the problems quickly and automatically, and enabling a newer demographic of workforce, a newer generation, if you will, to be able to solve problems quickly by more easily interacting with the system. Now, BMC MainView was built to do all of those things. It was built to be cost-effective, intelligent, and intuitive. It covers the whole range of technologies, as you can see around the outside of the sphere here. And it's designed to allow customers to solve problems faster, to be more efficient, to reduce costs. Now, interestingly enough, one of the concerns that customers share with us is the fear of risk in trying new technology. The good news is, things I've spoken about, automation, dynamic threshold determination, the smart alarms and alarm filtering, those technologies have been in use by MainView customers for a number of years. They're technologies we developed because we saw the need coming, and now customers use and rely on those to keep their systems performing properly. If I were to say it as simply as possible, what we're trying to do is simplify the complex. The mainframe's complex. The technologies that keep being used on the mainframe are more complex. The environment driven by digital engagement and the potential impact of social media are more complex. And BMC MainView is designed to help make that simple. Now, of course, that's a vendor's view. We did a survey of Mainview customers, and these were Mainview customers who compared Mainview to competitive monitors in making their decision. And we asked them what they thought of Mainview versus competitive monitors. And you can see the numbers, very high numbers, where they said Mainview helps them detect the problem sooner. Mainview helps them solve the problems faster. It improves their productivity and reduces mainframe costs. So, from the voice of our customers, Mainview is positioned to help our customers do dynamic systems management and handle the digital engagement challenges that our customers are facing. If you'd like more information, it's available at www.bmc.com/Mainview. If you'd like to contact me directly, there's my email, j_lipovich@bmc.com. So at this point, Janine, we'd like to open to questions.
Great, Jay. We have some, so let's get started. First question, if we have good thresholds set, are we okay?
It's interesting question. If we had good thresholds set, are we okay? It would depend on how your environment's changing. There are some mainframe sites with very static environments. There are not many. I think what we're seeing is the very static mainframe sites look at alternatives to that. But if you have a completely static mainframe site, your thresholds wouldn't be changing. Now, given that most people don't have completely static environments, what it means is the thresholds you've been using are likely to change, or they would need to change. And so using current thresholds, you could over-alarm for conditions or miss a problem and fail to alarm on it.
Okay, next question. I'm not sure if I need to change what I'm doing today. My company is a big believer, and if it's not broken, don't fix it. That is so true, particularly in mainframe. The challenge that we think we see, and if you look at all of this data, and as I mentioned at the start, over 10,000 data touch points that we've looked at, the fact is the mainframe's changing because the nature of organizations' use of the mainframe's changing. The nature of the applications, the way customers interact with it, the expectations of the customers. And so it's like if you don't change, then something's going to break, and then you'll be scrambling to change it afterwards. So right now it's not broken, but we're hanging on the edge of the potential for something to go wrong that we weren't prepared for, and create a problem. Okay, here's another one that touches on thresholds, Jay. So it may be redundant, but I just want to make sure in case there's a nuance in here that I'm not picking up on. You mentioned that most likely existing thresholds are no longer valid. A couple of my coworkers and I have spent a lot of time to build what we believe are still the right thresholds. Why do you believe they need to be updated, and how would we go about that?
So I think that touches on a couple of things. One, the key part is right at the beginning where you say you and your coworkers have built thresholds. That's one of the challenges that we're hearing from customers. They don't have time. Systems management professionals don't have time to go through building or rebuilding. So that's the first challenge. The second is, as we talked about, if you've got a dynamic environment, those thresholds won't be valid. So the way to go about it is to look at your history data. It's basically to do analytics. Do analytics of how are the metrics performing. Combine that with an understanding of your business cycles, and then say, based on those metric values, let's do some analysis of what's normal, and then understanding what's normal, maybe you use statistical analysis, for example. Understanding what's normal, you could then say, okay, if I go one more standard deviation away from that, I would say that represents a true anomaly. And now I've been able to establish some values based on data and based on analysis, rather than some of the knowledge that we had built in, pardon me, as individuals. Okay.
Analytics is a hot topic, including on the mainframe, and my manager has asked me how we can utilize it to isolate potential problems. Would you be able to help answer those questions?
So actually there are several ways you could do that. I was talking with one customer. Their operations group is actually using Watson to do an analysis of operational events, and they're doing deep analytics to understand the correlation between operation events, what they're doing. They're trying to decide best times for some maintenance windows and some database maintenance activity. How do you do it? It depends on what's available to you. There's a whole variety of tools, starting with a very basic, you use Excel. Moving on to something more sophisticated, you can use IronStream and flow data into Splunk, or use some platform capability like that to do analytics. If you've got access to Watson, Watson provides a lot of capabilities. If you want to do all of that yourself, for systems management, what we've tried to do is build the analytics into the solution. So we do the analytics, we do the threshold analytics. We do the analytics, for example, of job activity to detect looping or high CPU usage. We put the analytics in to understand the performance of IMS, BMPs or IMS regions, and identify those that could use action that would improve performance. So you can do it manually with a variety of tools, or if it's just in the systems management area, focus on the solution that has that built in.
Okay, Jay, you've pretty much been talking about risk today. Here's someone who says, wouldn't introducing a new systems management approach be considered risky? And basically wondering, what would you say to that?
Yeah, any change in the mainframe environment, people used to say was risk, but we change it all the time. So what we've seen from experience in the last, in the last 2 years, we've seen customers replace, at 70 sites, replace their systems management solutions with MainView. And there's a process you go through, not unlike mainframe change management processes, but there's a process you go through to make sure everything can be done even better than the way you used to be doing it. The MainView's got some capabilities built in, for example, a data dictionary. Data dictionary is really helpful in customers who have been converting, because they're familiar with a metric from another monitor, and they can look at the data dictionary, see the definition of the metric, and understand very quickly what metrics line up with what they were used to looking at. And then for new systems management professionals, a data dictionary helps them start to build their knowledge of what's going on in the mainframe and what all these metrics need. So yes, there's always risk in any kind of change. But if the net change lets you provide better availability, better responsiveness, lower cost, most IT organizations would look at those as positive factors and look at a structured way to change the systems management solution.
Okay, I see no more questions. I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, and I especially want to thank you, Jay, for sharing your expertise with us today. Just a reminder that tomorrow we'll be sending out a link to the recording of today's webinar, as well as links to other valuable BMC resources. That concludes our webinar. Thanks again, and have a great day.